Okay, welcome. Just going to be doing a quick run through of a finished unit. Now I have the display here, the buttons for controlling it. We have the projectile mounting area. We have the motor drive mounting area. We have the power outlet for the motor. We have the input jack for the power supply to it, 12 volts we want. I think it'll take up to 15, and we've got a switch for the motor. So the motor unit here is needs to be able to accommodate the different projectiles. It just slots on like such and plugs in, and then that is ready to go. Now we power the unit up. Okay, so looking at it more closely, alright, I'll put a projectile on just to allow it to 0. Okay, so the buttons here, we have the menu button on the right, we have calibration button, and we have the 0 button. So in normal use, the calibration button and the 0 buttons are the only buttons you'll use. You'll use the menu for configuration changes, or maybe the heater if need be. What we have on the display at the moment is in the top left we have a difference value. So this is the reading that we want to say how good our projectile is or not. Over here we have the raw reading from the sensor itself, right? And here we have the difference, this reading from what it was calibrated to. Of course we've turned it on, so none of those values mean anything until we've actually calibrated it. So we're going to do that now. Now for this unit, the calibration point is halfway within its meter. So if it has a meter that's here, we want the calibration point to be in the middle, so to speak. Now in terms of raw numbers, that's a number of 510, 512. So that's halfway on the analog to digital converter that forms the backbone of this. So the calibration will move it to that. Now you'll notice that the reading itself is actually climbing up from that value, and you can see that the difference from where it was calibrated at is 7, and the difference overall is the same, is going up together. Now the reason it's going up is because the heater's on and the unit's warming up. And so even just the heat change on the inside can create quite a significant variation on it. But while that's doing that, we'll go through the menu and we'll have a look at some of the menu items. Now, so we press the menu, it takes us in here. Now this is for zeroing it. You probably never really need to do that. That's what the calibration's for. So if we can see that if we make a change on the 0 reading, that the actual reading of the unit itself changes quite dramatically. That's a coarse adjustment. We have a fine adjustment. And you can see the reading changing for that. Now, we have here calibration ranges for the bullet caliber. So if you're doing 22s to 280, or you're doing 280s to 30 cal, that's only really relevant if the unit is calibrated differently for those different calibers, but this unit's not, so it's not actually relevant. And you'll see that when we switch to it, the reading goes to 0. So you just leave it on this one regardless. Even 30 cal projectiles works fine on it. Now the heater, this bit's very important. So this unit has a heater installed, and the heater is turned on. That's what this is saying. So we can turn the heater off or on. So up and down, adjust the value. So at the moment the heater is set for a range of about 25 degrees up, and the main purpose of the heater is to ensure that we're above ambient, and it helps maintain the stability of the unit if the internal temperature of it is above your ambient temperature. It means variations to the environment, the room you're in, aren't going to impact the readings too much if the heater is able to hold it at a constant temperature. So anyway, we want the heater on. Now what we have is a target temperature for this. Now these aren't in degrees, so the value here is arbitrary. I think the full range for the sensor and the heater setting that you're after is something like 25 degrees up to about 45 degrees. So at the moment it's set to about 26 degrees that it's aiming for, and it's not anywhere near that. So moving on, we've got whether we want to get into the full menus or not, and at this point we don't really want to. The full menus allow you to set up some other functionality that's in the software, and for the most part it's not relevant to the unit. All those menu options are more for me for originally configuring them. Yeah. So anyway, now the other one is saving it. Now what it will do is say, if you press save, it will save these settings to the chip, and so when you turn it back on, it'll be back to where it was at the moment. That's not really necessary for the most part. You only save it when you need to, because of course every time you start it up the temperature is different, so you're going to have to recalibrate it. So there's no real necessity of changing that. So here we are back on here, and it's reset it because we come out of the menu, and I'm just going to do a re-zero or recalibrate. Now one of the things it will do, the calibration routine was different to the original first calibration, and that's because it detected that we weren't so far off where the zero was. So I'll just actually demonstrate that again. I think if I unplug it and power it back on, I know that reading's quite... Actually, yeah, I think we'll be right. So we do a calibration of this, it might do a full one. No, it's done a quick one. So yes, if it's quite far off, it will do a full calibration. If it's close, it'll just do a quick one. So, because of course, as it's drifting by temperature, you don't want it to go into a full calibration mode when you really only need it to do a slight adjustment to center back on where the projectile is. So, to actually use it and take some readings, we want to turn the motor on. So I'll just zoom out. Now, the nature of it is that if the projectile is up, and I'll zoom in on this, if the projectile is not seated properly, the motor should actually pull it back to the backstop. And you'll see that. So now you can see that it's right on the backstop. So you can put the projectile down, and then when you're ready, you press 0. Sorry, I will zoom back onto the display. So when the projectile's ready, we press 0 and we watch the difference reading. So this one's settling down at about 15, 16. 16, 14, 15, 17, 14, 15, 17. So I'd say, yeah, 16, 17 for that particular one. Now what we have here is you can just pop the next one on, let it pull it back. When you're happy with it being back, you can take the reading. Now this is actually a different projectile, so I'm going to turn it off. Alright, different projectile, and I'm going to recalibrate it. I think the other one was a Nosler. This one's a JLK. So it's doing a full 0 here, so not a quick one. Okay, so now that's done, turn the motor back on. Okay, yes, the sound is as annoying as it sounds. So now that that's back, we hit 0, and we get 13, 16, 0 again, 13, 13, 14, 13, yeah. So I'd say I'd call that one 14. So when we're ready for it, because so we're getting 8 or 9, 9, 9, 10, so we'll call that one a 9. Fourteen, 15, 14, 13, 14, so yeah, we call that one a 14, very similar to that first earlier one. 0, so 23, 24, 24, 24, 24. So that one's a lot worse than the other ones. Another one here. Wow, okay, so this one's in the 40s. Definitely won't be using this. Yeah, so there we go. We'll just turn that off. So that's a quick demonstration of this final unit and a brief run through of how it's used, and I hope this is of interest. So thank you.